Okay.
Thank you. And if it wouldn't be for Zoom, I, for instance, could not continue in touch with Temple. So for me, Zoom is my lifeline.
Oh, well, we're glad to have you and to have everyone on. Helen, where are you calling in from today?
From home.
From home? Are you in
Yes.
LA? We've got people
Yes.
from all over.
Yes.
Okay, very nice.
I live on Spalding Avenue. That's 3 blocks east of Fairfax and Pico.
Okay, great.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
So I usually go. I do not go to the Resnick campus, and I will not go there.
Okay,
But
well, we've
but
got, our many campuses that are local to different folks and
that
also our
for
virtual campus.
that's right.
Um,
That's the good part. That's why I love
yeah,
it. Yes.
exactly. Able to
Yes.
come together in so many different ways.
Correct.
So I'm so excited to be here with all of you for our Torah study this week for Parshat Lech Lecha, which was my bat mitzvah parsha. For those of you I haven't gotten a chance to meet yet, I'm Rabbi Leah Fein. I started as a rabbi at Wilshire Boulevard Temple this summer, but I was a rabbi before that for 9 years in the Hillel world, first at Syracuse Hillel, and then most recently at Columbia Barnard Hillel for the past 5 years. And I'm from LA originally, and my family's been members at Wilshire for many, many generations. We were talking about, camp generations and connections before. So it's great to be here with all of you. I'm especially excited to dive into our Parsha together this week. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to do together, and then I'm going to ask my colleague Tim to introduce himself. So I am going to, in a moment, I'll share my screen. We are going to be looking at the text from this Parsha on Sepharia. Have you as a group looked at Sepharia before you Sepharia for Torah learning?
I think some of the other clergy do it when they show.
Okay, great. So welcome those who just came in. So I'm going to be pulling up the text of this week's Parsha on Sepharia, and normally I make source sheets and bring in sources from different times and places, and we put those in conversation with each other and discuss. But because of the content of this week's Parsha, I actually just want us to focus on the text. I'm going to be pulling up the text of this week's Parsha in Hebrew and in English, and we are just going to go verse by verse, unpacking it, asking questions about what we think the text means, what we think it's saying, what it isn't saying, what it means that it's not saying that. And so I'm going to encourage us over our next hour together, as we're reading the text, to think of all the questions that are coming to your mind, different interpretations, and to bring them into this space. So we'll start with the blessing for studying Torah, and then I'll let Tim introduce himself. So we'll begin with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for giving us this blessing, this mitzvah of studying Torah. And want to give my colleague, Tim Gaylord, who's on today. Tim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Just checking, is audio coming through okay?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Gaylord. My wife and I have been in Los Angeles this is our 4th year. We have an 11-year-old who's at Browerman East. I am changing careers to follow in Rabbi Fein's footsteps, and I am working as a rabbinic intern with Rabbi Fein and Rabbi Eshel at the Irmis campus this year. Thanks very much for having me. It's lovely to meet you all.
We're so lucky to have Tim with us, not just today, but part of our community. And Tim, I think you're going to be leading one of the Torah studies soon.
Yeah, probably in January sometime.
Okay, amazing. All right, so can everybody see my screen? Parshat Lech Lecha?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are going to begin. I'm going to read the first three verses. As I'm reading, try to pick out the words, the phrases that you are noticing, and any questions about the text that you have. All right, starting with verse 1. Adonai said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse the one who curses you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you." So this is one of the most famous passages from the Torah. The very first time that God speaks to, he's not Abraham yet, he's still Abram. What are you noticing about this first dialogue between God and Abram? What sticks out to you? Yeah, Benjamin.
Thank you, Rabbi Fein. I mean, the one that jumped out to me was, "I'll bless, I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse the ones who curse you." I mean, that's, you know, I've got you covered, but I'll take care of the people that are against you.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it's both sides. Like it could have just been the blessing side or it could have just been the cursing side, but we have both. And this is actually also a bit typical of the Torah and poetry is that the way even here that Safaria is laying this out for us. And if you have a Tanakh at home, for example, the way your Tanakh probably lays it out for you is here. I can show you what mine looks like. It looks like these bits of poetry and these lines that go together. And so we see these different pairings. And it seems like you can't really have one without the other, that there's some kind of match between the blessing and the curse. Great. What else is sticking out in these few verses?
Well, the contrast between go forth from your native land and your father's house and the rest of it. So it's saying that, like, for the moment now, you need to leave a place of comfort and familiarity, and you need to go into a place of danger and unfamiliarity and unknown and tribulation or whatever, the journey across the desert. But, that's followed by God being with him, so that things will go his way and not go against him while he's on this journey. That was one thing that I thought was interesting about it.
Nice. And so if we just read verse number 1, it could potentially paint a story of what's coming next could be dangerous or confusing or scary in some way. But God reassures with the next two verses saying, "You are probably scared. This is probably a very frightening ask, but I promise you I will be with you. I promise you there will be blessings to come." And for any of the folks on the call who know Hebrew, this particular translation of verse 1 is interesting. And I don't know why the translators made the choices they did, but here it says, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." But in the Hebrew, it says something different. In the Hebrew, it says, "Leave me'artzacha," like leave your land, umi moladecha, leave your birthplace, and leave your father's home. So in the Hebrew text, in the original, we actually have three layers instead of two. It's not just leaving your land, to also leaving your birthplace and leaving your father's home. Because in the ancient world, it was typical for families to continue living together. So the Hebrew phrase here is mi beit avicha. The beit av was the standard way of living in the ancient world. Why do you think we need all three? Why can't God just say, either leave your home or leave your land or leave your birthplace? It seems redundant. What do folks make of that?
All those places are very familiar to you, and to go to someplace strange isn't going to be easy.
So highlighting the familiar versus the strange. And so we continue to have these dichotomies that the text is setting up for us: a familiar place and a strange place, blessing and curse. Great. Yeah, Douglas, go ahead.
In that second verse, what stuck out to me is, I will make your name great. It's like God is aiming that toward his ego, and we're going to make you. And that's why all of the work involved in this is, worth it, because he's going to be king of the hill.
Yeah, and I can imagine that God is thinking about, okay, maybe how can I convince somebody to actually do this? And right, it seems like God is trying to appeal to something in Abraham, seems like here his ego, to make him know, you will prosper from this. Your name will be great. And I think that name piece is such an important part to highlight, because at the very end of this parsha is when Abram's name is changed to Abraham. So we have that bookend in the parsha of talking about the name at the beginning and a bit of foreshadowing for the end and what that name change is going to mean later. Great. Other things or interpretations that have stuck out to you in these verses? One of the things that I'm thinking about a lot is the idea of the land, and how fundamental within our these opening verses of our foundational text as a people and the father of the Jewish people, that so much of it is tied to the land. And I think just like feeling especially attuned to that with everything going on in Israel right now. But that, like, the idea of the land being so central to this promise, to this covenant, and to this relationship. It's in the first few words that God says. And again, like, we have these different sides. We have a native land and we have this promised land. And this journey that Abraham is making from one land to the other is also the very first journey that we have in the Torah that is not a journey from exile. Every other time in the Torah, when somebody is asked to make a journey until now over land, it has always been because they have been exiled from their home. But this is the first voluntary journey, and it's being asked to go to this land. And then the other piece I think that's very interesting is this idea of being a blessing. I'm curious how folks interpret that. Like, how do you interpret what it means to be a blessing, both in the text and also as the children of Abraham, as Jews today, that this is not just this covenant that's being made with Abraham, but it's also with us as a result. So how do you understand it in this text, and does that have any bearing on us today? Yeah, Cindy.
Well, hearing it, I just think of what we say about someone that's deceased. May their name be a blessing. Mm-hmm. That, to me, it means that your life was worthwhile and that you contributed something by your being alive.
Nice. That there's also something enduring about being a blessing, that it's not just, what you do in the here and now, but there's a legacy. Like, there's something between blessing seems to be tied to legacy also. Great, Benjamin.
Well, I don't want to be Benjamin Downer today, but with the geopolitical aspect of Israel and that land being such a hotspot, might it have been better if the Israelites, had gone to Saudi Arabia and had all the natural resources, and then maybe they would have had, had a different standing or something. I mean, it just doesn't seem, I don't know, I'm being very negative, but I know Israel's beautiful. I've been there many times, but it is such a, you know, the third rail. It's just become
And it's
tough.
also interesting because even when I mean, as we're going to see, even when Abram and Sarai get to the land, then there's a famine in the land and they have to leave. So this land is upheld in the beginning as like this promised land, but even, a few verses from now they get there and it's not necessarily the land flowing with milk and honey as, the Torah describes it much, much later. So that's also an interesting piece that it doesn't seem to be about, the land doesn't seem to be about what kind of material wealth or comfortable life you will have as a result of the land. It seems to be about something else. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. Brad, then Jonathan.
Well, I'm speaking very personally here and not biblically, but every time I have a Torah study, Cindy asks me how I'm doing. And to me, that is a blessing. She's been a blessing to me as I've gone through this journey. So I can see how a person can be a blessing, which is maybe a little bit counterintuitive when we think of individuals being a blessing. But I get it.
That's beautiful. And that's also, like Cindy was saying, blessing as legacy. And you're talking about blessing right now in, this life. And, an important reminder for all of us when we talk about what it means to be a blessing, God willing, it is both right now and also after we're gone. And there are many ways to make that happen right now. Thank you. Jonathan, go ahead.
Well, it was interesting that the theme of legacy came up, because as I was looking, and I sort of noticed it too, and I thought this also then kind of points to Isaac and everything, because it talks about and this point I was trying to make also leads into a question I want to make, because it says like all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So it does seem like there's going to be some great legacy, and for that you need an heir. And so again, we sort of have the trial and tribulation of the joy of the voyage being countered with the great tale of blessing, or the promise of blessing. But then we know this is going to be followed by decades of heartache, because he doesn't have the heir and all the drama that goes on with that. So it's sort of like he doesn't have what he's really going to need to, do the blessing, right? Or have this blessing if he doesn't have an heir. So I thought that was kind of an interesting point. But then I really wonder, like, what is all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you? Like, not even, so this not only is them then and then like Jews today, but it's actually like everybody, like not even modern Jews only, but like the whole earth, the whole world. And so I'm wondering, like, what is the blessing? What kind of blessing, is it? How is this blessing us, or how is this blessing not only us but everybody? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I'd love to hear people's responses and also what you're describing, like how you're pulling apart this part of the text of all the families of the earth is also the same theology that we see in the prayer Aleinu. that there's like this sense of oneness over all the people on earth looking to God and saying God is the one true God. And we don't necessarily think about like that in our heads when we're saying Aleinu, but that's what the words are saying, and it seems very tied to what's here. So yeah, any want to open up Jonathan's question? Any thoughts on what he raised? If not, that's okay, and feel free to interrupt me. And I mean, I can share how I understand it, and how I think about it today. But I think about different Jewish values that are also universal, and for us as Jews, we express those in particularist kind of ways, and we direct those also beyond ourselves. So for me, when I read the verses, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you, I'm thinking about what is the intersection between the values that, you know, God willing, we all hold as people, and what is the particularist way that I, as a Jew, can express those values and live those values. Okay, any other comments on these three verses? All right, we're going to keep going. Okay, I'm going to scroll. Okay, so that is the first time that God speaks to Abram, and notably, Abram does not say anything back. Rather, verse 4, Abram went forth as Adonai had commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the wealth that they had amassed, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem at the terebinth of Moreh. The Canaanites were then in the land. One of the things that I think is most interesting about this parsha, and this is something I wrote about in my bat mitzvah to Bar Torah, was who speaks when in this parsha is fascinating. So much is being asked of so many people. This is a key moment in our history as a people, and so far, the people haven't said anything. Only God is talking. So Abram just goes as he is commanded. And different people have interpreted different things. Like, was there some kind of dialogue between God and Abram that isn't recorded here? It's interesting that it talks about Lot going with him, but it's not until the next verse that we even find out who Lot is. And so, like, the ordering of things here is also interesting. We meet Lot before we meet Sarai, who becomes this key figure in our history and in our Torah, but still it says Lot went with him. It doesn't say Sarai went with him. There are so many pieces here that leave so much, at least for me, to be desired and to be filled in. Same question as we were looking at for the first three verses. What are you noticing? What questions come up for you in verses 4 through 6? Yes, Cindy.
Lot's father is also named Haran. And the
so,
land is
yes.
Haran?
Yes.
Okay, that confused me.
I know, it's confusing. Yeah. Brad.
Well, he's taken his brother's son, but what about the rest of the clan? You would have thought that the whole clan would have joined together in leaving. So that's a bit of a puzzle for me.
And especially in the context of the ancient Near East, that's a big puzzle, is why are they the only ones who are going? It's not a common practice for people to leave their families. Yeah, Cindy.
But let's think what was supposed to going on. Abraham, they were all idol worshippers. Then Abraham says, I hear this voice, and this voice is telling me to leave. I would think most people wouldn't go, wouldn't believe him. To go where? Who is this voice? And that maybe Lot was the only one that had the faith to go with him, that everybody else doubted, like, what is this voice you're hearing?
Nice. So, like, we're imagining this conversation that took place in the family. Abraham saying, this voice, God has spoken to me. And then, right, maybe Lot is somebody who also believes, and that's why he went. But it's interesting because later in the story, like, Lot is such a conflicting figure. And so there's something about Lot that makes him, we imagine, maybe feel connected with Abram's journey in some way, and then we'll see it diverge as well.
Because idols don't speak to you.
Right. But I also, like, I wonder if idol worshippers at that time thought that the idols were speaking to them. I don't know.
Depends what drugs they took.
Depends what else is going on.
I think that if you believe so much in idols, you imagine that the idols are talking to you.
Mm.
I mean, that's the only thing I mean, I don't know people that are idol. Well, I know people that worship other people, and they believe that those people are giving them whatever inspiration they need to go on.
And I think the big difference there is like having something physical to show for that versus completely diverging from any physicality of that into this voice, this being. And also, what does speaking to somebody look like? Like, yeah, that's also something I wonder. And so, like Meryl was saying, well, maybe people felt like the idols were speaking to them also. And I wonder, like, what did God's voice sound like to Abram? Were other people able to hear it? Was it just him? Because Sarai doesn't necessarily respond to that. Lot's not responding. And so I also wonder, like, who else could hear? Was that even possible?
I think it's also important to notice that Abraham was a wealthy individual. And when we think of today, when we think of people who are migrating, they're typically people who are poor and looking for a better life. And here it's taking quite a risk when you're wealthy to leave, to leave a place where you've been successful.
Yeah, so maybe all the more so it's showing Abram's faith in God that he is willing to leave his comfort and his success in order to go to this new place. That's a big question mark. Nice. Yeah, I wonder if that yeah, just like reinforces how we experience Abram as somebody who is full of faith. One of the interesting pieces here also is when it says, it talks about his wealth, and it says, and the persons they had acquired in Haran. There are a lot of interesting commentaries on this. Has anybody read any of these commentaries? Because this is a bit of a question questionable verse. In the Hebrew, the translation for what here says persons, it says hanefesh. It says ve'ed hanefesh asher asu beharan. Like it says the nefesh today in Hebrew means soul, but biblically it means bodies. So, and the bodies that they made in Haran is an interesting, weird phraseology. And so the way a lot of the rabbis take that phrase is to anachronistically see this as Abram and Sarai have already converted a bunch of people to monotheism and like are already amassing this nation, this family within them of similarly people of faith and who are coming with them on their journey. But I think like to me, I read that and it's kind of a weird phrase. And I think it's interesting the way the rabbis understand that to mean the earliest conversion. It's not clear in the text, but that is one interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any comments about verses 4 through 6 before we keep going?
Well, to me, that interpretation seems a little bit far-fetched. To me, it seems like he's bringing his household slaves.
Yes.
I agree with Brad. It sounded like slaves to me too.
Yeah, nefesh, like even in English, the term soul can mean like, your true non-physical, spiritual, essential self, but it can also just mean you. Like you can read in the newspaper, last week in the early hours of the morning, the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank with all 2,000 souls on board. A soul can mean a self or an individual or, that person's spirit form or whatever. And so I think here it just means like, it just means people is kind of what.
And I think that's a shot reading of the text. Like that is the most literal reading of the text, is to see this as people who they probably owned, who are probably, these people are probably their slaves. We already know that they're very wealthy. So.
But it could be a remiss to like something
Oh.
spiritual going on,
Yeah, like right, like the spiritual soul that you were talking about, yeah, and like the being. I wonder also if it's the rabbis trying to like read something into the text so that it's not slavery, because for them it was probably also very problematic for Abraham and Sarah to have owned slaves. And I wonder if it's also them just looking back and saying, no, there's no way they could have possibly owned slaves. Actually, they were doing the opposite. They were making Jews. They were doing this very holy work, and they were converting people to monotheism instead of it being slavery. Yeah, so I think that is a very complicated and loaded phrase there. All right, so God appears to Abram again in verse 7. Adonai appeared to Abram and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. And he, Abram, built an altar there to Adonai, who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to Adonai and invoked Adonai by name. Then Abram journeyed by stages toward the Negev. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Okay, and then we'll pause before we enter Egypt. So God appears to Abram again. Finally, we are in the land and we get there, and God says, okay, here we are. We have arrived. I'm assigning this land to you and your offspring. And as was raised before, there is no offspring yet. And so even God, promising that must, give Abram a million questions. What I'm interested in here is Abram building an altar to God, because the same altar is one that Abram returns to in the land over and over and over again. And I also just want to point this out because today in Jewish community, we pray communally. There are fewer instances where we pray as individuals. The vast majority of our prayers communal. There are so many prayers that we can only say with a minyan. But in the Torah, all of our patriarchs pray individually. And it's an interesting, oh, sorry, was there a hand that just went up?
Yes,
yeah.
Donna, you
Yeah,
just
Donna, go ahead.
read my mind. Praying individually, we're all individuals, and we all love Adonai. We light our candles at home if we're single or we're like are in a relationship that's for a long distance or whatever. In my home, my apartment, I light my candles. I talk to Adonai all the time. They probably think I'm crazy. I don't care. I believe that God exists today, like He did. He's universal, and that He loves us. And I'm not afraid to speak to the one who created me, and I believe that He hears me. So individually we do speak. I mean, I do personally. I don't know how. I'm not talking to myself, but I just want to throw that out there because I sing to Him. I sing Papa from Yentl from Streisand's song. I'm singing to my heavenly Father, my earthly Father, and to Adonai. So that's how my take on life.
Nice. And there is such a precedence in our tradition for individual prayer also, and so much space for that. And the fact that we don't have communal prayer in the stories of our patriarchs, I think is very interesting. That there seems to be a real personal one-on-one relationship that is being developed between our ancestors and God, and also not just the relationship in prayer, but also there's a sacredness to this space that Abram builds this altar, and this is the altar that he returns to multiple times. So for us today, just thinking about the sanctuaries that we pray in, that in Hebrew, the phrase makom kavua, having like our permanent set place, even within the sanctuary there. I don't know if there's anyone on the Zoom right now, but there are some people who like love to sit in the same seat in the sanctuary for all the services. And that is like your makom kavua. That is your place. That is your set place of comfort for prayer. And it seems that Abram here is establishing that same idea. There's this relationship with God in prayer. It is personal and it is tied to a sacred space.
May I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Oh, what about, I know that I talked to my Zadie and to my Bubby that are passed on. Isn't that what a lot of people do? Talk to their ones that have passed on. Do me a favor while you're up there. I mean, I always do that. That's okay, right?
Yeah, I'm sure many people do that. I think here, just like looking at the text, this seems to be really Abram and God and that conversation.
Thank you,
Okay.
Rabbi. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. Okay, so we are about to enter Egypt. But before we enter Egypt, so God takes Abram on this journey from his land, from his family, from the comforts, success, all of that, leads him to the promised land. He gets to the promised land, and there's a famine, and he can't even stay there. Why does God take Abram to a place that can't even sustain him in that moment? Meryl, is that a hand?
I think it's because you have to see the good and the bad of life. I mean, life isn't always so wonderful. There are things that happen that individually or as a group that we consider miserable. And I think you have to see that before you see the good. I don't think you can manage both without seeing each side.
Nice. So God's being realistic with Abram and
It
saying,
sounds like it.
yeah, nice. Thank you. Okay, Brad, then Cindy.
Well, it seems to me Abraham is being tested, as so many of the figures in the Bible are, time after time.
Nice. And there's a midrash, there's a rabbinic interpretation that Abram is tested 10 times over the course of his life. And this seems to be one of those essential tests. Cindy.
I think it establishes our claim to the land and our presence there, that he had to physically be there, even though he left. And for the Exodus to say that this is our land and we're going back there.
Okay, nice. So even if he can't, stay there for a long period of time, just going there, doing somehow establishing like that presence is in and of itself important. Jonathan.
I just want to echo and maybe flesh out a little bit of Brad's point. That was really what jumped out at me after your prompt, was that, like, for a person for whom God is not real, they're basically just going to be they're going to be seeking out their local comforts and the betterment for themselves and for those around them. For somebody to up and leave and do something dangerous and difficult without any real promise of reward, looking at it from a normal there's not enough over there, we don't know what's over there and all that. It's just not a good situation from a normal naturalistic view. So this sort of like God always wants to take you out of the comfort zone to sort of differentiate you from somebody who doesn't really care about him or know him. So that one guy's just trying to get the next promotion and make money, but say another person is willing to work twice as hard and forego the promotion and make less money because they're doing something for God, that shows that they have a different set of values or on a different set of path. And I think that's what, like, when Brad said that, I sort of saw God showing, or putting Abraham on one of these paths to show them that he's different. If Abraham didn't really, if God weren't something really real for Abraham, there's no way he would have done that, So it's a test. It's a test, like a revelatory test or an assessment type of a test, I think.
Nice. And right, we had this verbal promise from God at the beginning. Your name will be great. Nations will bless themselves by you. You will really become something. And so the way that God can see, is this really my guy? Is he in it just because I'm appealing to his ego? Or is he in it because there's a piece of him that is so faithful, that really believes in this? He has to go through something hard, and he has to, like Meryl was saying, like, be part of that realistic life of, even when things are going to be difficult, even when there are going to be obstacles, faith is shown when somebody sticks around through the obstacles. And that's what a real relationship and a real partnership looks like, is not just sticking around when things are great and when big promises are made, but also when things are really hard, and before maybe all the great promises are fulfilled. Great. Douglas, do you want to say something as well? Okay. All right. So oh yeah, Douglas, go ahead.
No, I'm just acknowledging your statement. So no, I don't have anything right now, but I am here.
Okay, thanks. All right, we are about to get to Egypt. So we are on verse 11. We've gone through 10 verses so far, everybody. Okay, as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, who, I just want to note, has not spoken yet. He said to his wife Sarai, oh, and I think this is the first time Abram speaks as well. All right, so this is the first time we even hear anybody other than God speaking. I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think she is his wife, they will kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may remain alive thanks to you. Okay. So we've had this very faithful Abram, and now he is doing this. Cindy, go ahead.
That I know some midrash says that I understand why Abraham did this, but that they in reality were half siblings, possibly.
Yeah,
So it wasn't
the
a complete lie.
right. The rabbis are trying to do two things. They're trying to, one, make it so that Abram didn't lie, and two, make it so that it's okay that his wife was with somebody else, and still Isaac, who will be her son, is still like going to be the legitimate heir to things. Yeah, Brad.
Well, I mean, he's prostituting his wife. So I'm struggling with how you can put a positive spin on this. Is there is there a way to put a positive spin on this, or are we just supposed to accept the fact that our patriarchs all had failings?
I think that's a great question. How do other people read this? Yeah, Donna.
To answer your question of putting a spin on it, I think this collectively applies to all of us, that we go through situations where we're like going to the land unknown. Say like if you're wanting to be a singer or an actor, or you want to audition, and all you people with the voice in your head saying you'll never make it, kid, you'll never, you have to push forward wherever your dreams are. And you always go in the unknown. And maybe you're in a place where, God forbid, you're a child that's abused and you have to leave a situation. There's all kinds of variables on what people go through to push through to the other side. And then when you go through to the other side, you make a difference and you help and reach out and help others. I think that's a cycle of life that we go through, and we have to. And in the Torah, Abraham had taken to this land, right? All these problems. I mean, it looks like that's what we're all facing today. That's what wanted to say. But we all,
Okay.
through the community and the Torah and the church and Zoom and, well, when I say church, I mean the temple. We all together on Zoom. This is inspirational for me to join with Cindy and Merle and all of you together, because I'm not there at your home, and I want to kiss your pet. Kiss your pet, Cindy. Give you a hug. Nice to see you. Thank you for doing that, darling. I'll be in touch with Susie for you. Okay.
Thank you. Jonathan, go ahead.
Well, I've raised my hand quite a bit, so I'll just be real quick and say directly to Brad. My view on that is different because the Roman Catholics and the Muslims and a lot of the rabbis have the same tendency to have this sacralized history of saints and tzaddikim and all of these guys that are perfect and sinless, and all of that. And I look at all the heroes, not just Abraham, as being very mortal, and I make sure I don't demonize them, and I don't ignore their strengths, because they have a lot of very unusual strengths, but they have a lot of failings. I mean, Noah was a drunk, Jacob was a mama's boy. David was a adulterer and violent murderer. Solomon had hundreds of wives and all. I mean, these guys were very, very fallible people, and very normal and human. So I think as long as I don't ignore their strengths and just say that because he did this fallible thing, then he's a terrible person, he can't be a hero of mine. I don't go that far, but I say that this really, fascinating person, in a lot of ways amazing, this hero of mine is very fallible and screwed some things up. That's the way I am with almost all of them. I don't know how the rest of you are, but that's one thing that's different from me in the rabbinic tradition. There's a really strong rabbinic tradition of, Moses never sinned, he could read your mind, and all this kind of stuff. And I focus more on the human side. Yeah.
I'm inclined to read things similarly also. I think that, all the midrashim are so interesting. And for me, what's interesting more so is what they are reacting to and why they are reacting to it. And it seems to me that all these midrashim that the rabbis bring us, about this story and how it could have worked is because they're deeply uncomfortable with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to fill in these facts that we don't see in the plain text. That there's something for them that's also, not sitting right. And one of the things that I love about Judaism is that, like Jonathan said, our tradition acknowledges that people are people and that we all make mistakes. Just like Abraham had to go through things that are challenging, like life is full of its challenge. People in all of our complexities are full of our own challenges. And that's also why in our Torah, and in our tradition, we are worshiping one God. We are not worshiping other people. We don't worship Abraham and Sarai. We worship God. And we view Abram and Sarai as leaders of our tradition, people who do have values that align with ours and can teach us so much. And at the same time, what it means for me to be in conversation with text is to be able to say, I think I'm uncomfortable with this story. I'm uncomfortable with what he did. And recognizing that it led them out safely, and how do we hold all of those pieces of our text all together at the same time, because they're all present here. Brad, is your hand newly raised? I couldn't tell if
No.
Okay, let's close out this chapter. Okay, so Abram asks Sarai to say that she is his sister. When Abram entered Egypt, and the text says, it's interesting, it says going down to Egypt. So we already have this foundation that Egypt is a place that is down. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw how beautiful the woman was. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's palace. And because of her, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, asses, male and female slaves, she-asses, and camels. But Adonai afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarai, the wife of Abram. Pharaoh sent for Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now here is your wife, take her and be gone." And Pharaoh put agents in charge of him, and they sent him off with his wife and all that he possessed. Yes, Cindy, I see your hand.
Well, the thing that just stuck out to me is how she became dehumanized, Sarah, that all of a sudden she's the woman. She's not referred to by her name.
Yeah. And we have no idea, like she just seems to be like used here. And we have no idea what she's thinking, what she is feeling. And then in verse 15, the woman, not even Sarai. Yeah, Donna.
Yeah, that's the way the world is today. I don't want just, I'm not happy about the results of the election, but I will say women are not treated the way they should be, and that was what the problem was in this country. They weren't ready for a woman.
I'm curious to hear other thoughts on how this part of Abram and Sarai's journey closes out as we were finishing up our Torah study in chapter 12.
Her name isn't even like Cindy, her name's not mentioned. It's not recognized. So an object of their affection, and her name, and he lies about who she is because they're male chauvinists.
And it's interesting when it talks about the affliction with plagues that God sends. In that context, it says her name. It says Sarai, the wife of Abram. And so I think that placement is also very intentional, that God at least in my reading, God is uncomfortable with this situation, and so God afflicts that household. And God sends those plagues because God is uncomfortable with what is going on. I don't know if other people read it the same way or differently. But I also, one last thing that I want to highlight is just verse 1 from chapter 13, where it says, "From Egypt, Abram went up to the Negev with his wife and all that he possessed, together with Lot." So we had them going down physically into Egypt. And now this is the first time that the Torah mentions going up to the promised land. And we still talk about that today when we say, making aliyah, like going up to the land. And every single time the Torah talks about Egypt, it is in the context of going down. So I just want to thank everybody for our Torah study today. I really appreciate being able to focus on this opening chapter of Lech Lecha, really pulling it apart and trying to dissect it, and also seeing together in this Parsha, there's something really amazing to me about how miraculous it is, about this connection between God and Abraham, the blessings, the promised land, all of those pieces that are so inspirational and foundational to who we are. And in the same chapter, the deep humanity of Abraham as well, and recognizing those two pieces and holding them together. And so my hope for all of us as we enter into Shabbat is to try and hold on to the first 3 verses of our Parsha this week from Lech Lecha, to really reflect on what it means to be a blessing today in the here and now and in our legacies, and how we can actualize that for ourselves and the people around us. So thank you, everybody, for a wonderful discussion today, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone soon. Wishing you all
Thank
Shabbat
you.
Shalom.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi Leah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat
Shabbat Shalom,
shalom.
everyone. Be well.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, everyone.